The next one that they covered is called anchoring. I don't think we do this in intermediate, so this one should be new. Anchoring. The idea with anchoring is that an original amount contaminates your estimates. So some original amount contaminates your estimate going forward, even if it's clearly irrelevant. I didn't necessarily cover it in class, I'm sure. So one of their classic examples that they did is they had like one of these like Wheel of Fortune type wheels, and they would bring it out and they would have you spin it, and there's these different numbers between 0 and 100. And the game was rigged. They actually had the wheel rigged so it stopped in certain places, but no, you couldn't tell that it was. And you'd either get a 10 or a 65. Okay, so one of those two numbers would come up the way that the wheel would spin. Okay, but nobody knows that. It's every fifth number between 0 and 100. So you'd have somebody come up and they would spin the wheel. And they'd either get 10 or they would get 65. And then you would ask them this question: what's the percent of African nations in the United Nations? Is it greater or less than the number you spun? So you'd ask them, like totally not related to this, right? But you either have a 10 or a 65. So you would ask, if they got a 10, are 10% of the nations in the United Nations greater, is the percent of the number greater than 10? Or is it less than 10? Or is it greater than 65, or is it less than 65? The first group with the 10s said it was on average, like if you actually asked them, they would say, oh, greater. But then if you ask them, they would say, well, what is the percentage? They would say 25. The second group, they would say, well, it's less than 65. It's less than 60. It can't be 65% of the countries. I don't know, right? There's not that. So most people say less. You ask them how much, and they would say, well, about 45% of those countries are in it. So from the spin of the first wheel, your answer, if you got a 10, you would say it was 25. If you spun it again, or somebody else, right, came up and spun enough people, they would say it was 45. So 25 versus 45 is your estimate based on how did you spin the wheel. It changes that much, right? So you're anchored to that initial amount. There's a bunch of different experiments like this. They do stuff about estimating years when Abe Lincoln did something, and I don't know, there's whole bunch of these different ones. Yeah.
So would gambler's fallacy fit into this?
Not necessarily, because there we're seeing a sequence of things and then saying, oh, it has to offset. Whereas this is just some one-off, and you don't even have to do it with the wheel. This is what stores do all over the place. So my wife and I used to, it was comedy, and then it became tragedy, and then eventually we got okay with it. It became comedy again. But we would watch JTV, jewelry television. It's like QVC, whatever. Seriously, if you can find this channel or even look at it on YouTube, it's crazy. I mean, they get on, and I want to talk to these people. Because I'm like, you have to know what you're doing. And it's like they're trying to rip off old ladies who have some money. And then I'm like, but are they making the old ladies happy? Like, do the old ladies like getting crappy jewelry for their grandkids and it makes them feel well? Is that okay? I don't know, but they get on there and they're just like, they just talk galore. Like they'll be like, this is a lab grown gem. Nothing's better than a lab grown gem. And then the next thing that's up there is like, this is a real gem. It's not lab grown like that fake stuff, or whatever. And they just sell whatever is in front of them. But what they do is they get on and they're like, here's the estimated retail price, $546, but not our price. We get a discount because we buy in bulk, and JTV, we're good negotiators. So we're going to charge you $159. You should sell it for $550 if you go to a store, but we'll sell it to you for $159. And they'll post that. And then they'll say, no, wait. We're going to have a special sale, right? And they'll cut this for this. And then they actually have I couldn't find one that I could get a picture of, but they actually have something below the event price that's like Todd's Picks, or whoever is doing the thing. And so they will cut the price again. Why are they doing this, right? Because they put this there first. to scream to you, put an anchor there. Hey, that's how much this thing's worth, right? Can you see, like, I mean, seriously, go watch this. This is every single thing that they sell, they do this, right? Every single thing that they sell, they do this. And then they kind of move from there. Why? Because it works. It works, right? It can't work on everything and whatever, you know, whatever, but for their kind of items and stuff, this works. This goes through and it sets an anchor when you have that first number, even if you think it's totally irrelevant and it seems somewhat foolish, it can set that anchor. All right, so off of, you guys get this idea, this concept of anchoring. You basically throw an anchor and then it's harder to move from the anchor, right? Okay, so I have a question for you to answer with the people around you real quick. You can come up with an intelligent answer about these questions. Yeah, go ahead.
We talked about it being substitution. So instead of asking the question or answering the hard question, is that a good price? You're substituting in the question, is that a better price?
I mean, how many people go to a store and see when something is just marked off and it's on sale, you don't say that that's the case? How many people won't say that? Like you're talking to your friend and it says it's $10, marked down to $7. And you go, hey, I was thinking about getting this shirt. How many of you just say it's $7? Almost all of you say it was 10 and it's now only 7, right? It's because your brain's answering that. It's a better price, right? Like that's okay, right? Let's go kind of quickly so we can move on here just to availability bias. This was another one. We have one class in of behavioral at the end of intermediate micro, and I list some of these biases. This is another one. The classic one of this is the safety of flights versus the safety of cars. It's much easier to think of plane crashes and stuff in part because of the media. And so we think of that as being a more dangerous experience relative to driving in a car. Because driving in a car, if there's a fatal accident, doesn't make the national news for 7 days. Right? Whereas if there's a plane crash, it does. So we rely on immediate examples that come to mind when we're evaluating the probability of an event. Our bias here is that we think things that are easier to recall, that are more available to our mind, are more likely. And most of the time that works for us. Things that are easier to recall are more likely. The reason they're easier to recall is because they've happened more frequently. That's not always the reason why they're easier to recall. Sometimes it's easier to recall because it was on the news for a week straight and you're bombarded with it and all of this other stuff. So people estimate probabilities according to the ease of thinking of examples or the ease of recalling evidence. We use a mental shortcut, a heuristic that relies on immediate examples that come to mind. Things that are easier to recall, we think of as being more likely to occur. Easier to think of means more likely. That's the heuristic. Another example that is brought up in a lot of these probability, like books that you read about probability and availability bias and things like that, is shark attacks. So they get reported on widely, all this stuff, they're popularized. The book Super Freakonomics, Levitt and Dubner, the follow-up to their Freakonomics book, talked about this in there and made the argument about the summer of 2001. The US media all over, they have all of this stuff where the US media called it the summer of the shark, right? So throughout the summer, it was the summer of the shark, 2001. Mind you, it was like the whole second half of the summer, we were already labeling it the summer of the shark. And we'd only gotten halfway through and all of this stuff or whatever. And it started because there was an 8-year-old playing on the shore of Florida and a bull shark ripped off his right arm. Oh, right, kid loses his right arm and a chunk of his thigh. It was terrible, hit the news, summer of the shark begins, right? Time magazine, you can actually look this up. Time seems like respectable and font, you know, whatever. They actually have this in there in one of the magazines. So to start the article, sharks come up silently and without warning. There are 3 ways that sharks strike. It's the hit and run, the bump and bite, and the sneak attack. The hit and run is the most common. The shark may see the sole of a swimmer's foot, think it's a fish, and take a bite before realizing it's an unusual prey. Right? They go on and talk about the summer of the shark, right? It's like, that's very scary, right? We don't want to think about those things. Please get out of my system one. I don't want, a kid lost his arm from a shark, right? I don't really want to think about that, but it's scary to think about. I mean, you go, then you're like, oh, should I swim in the ocean? And there's all these news outlets saying all of this stuff, right? How many shark attacks actually happen in a year, and how many of them are fatal? During 2001, the summer of the shark, there were 68 shark attacks worldwide. 4 were fatal. Okay, that's not 0, but 68 world, it's a big freaking world, guys. 68 worldwide, 4 are fatal, right? 2001, by the numbers, so this comes from Super Freakonomics. Not only are the numbers kind of lower than the media hype or whatever, but between 1995 and 2005, so a 10 years period that kind of has 2001 pretty much right in the middle of it, there was an average of 60.3 shark attacks each year, with a high of 79 and a low of 46. And on average, there were 6 fatalities a year with a high of 11 and a low of 3. In other words, the headline during the summer of the shark, 2001, might have just as easily read, shark attacks about average this year. And yet we like way play it up and we have all these things. It's worse now because everybody's just dying for content because we have to have it 24 hours now. It used to be you had like a news cycle and it stopped and it was like, hey, we got content for today. That no longer is the case. So they have to throw it in front of you no matter what happens, right? So I've heard this referred to over and over again as a Florida man syndrome, right? A Florida man, it's like, yes, you can have this one guy did something crazy, right? And, whatever, it's Florida, but hey, it's a Florida man, right? That's based on probability you're going to have. Does that mean like it's endemic of what's happening here? Not necessarily, it's just things we can think of.